Okay. Hey Manish, thank you so much for joining us. Really nice to have you. So this is a holiday special, and that's why we have a special guest, Manish. Manish, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Atul. Thanks for having me on the podcast for this holiday special. Hello, everyone. My name is Manish Gajria. I am a product leader in Meta in London right now. I've been living in London for the last 18 years after having spent maybe about 6.5 years in the San Francisco Bay Area, which was the first time I'd ever left India and kind of ventured out. But yeah, bulk of my time now outside of India has been in London. I live here with my family, my wife and two kids. One of them is a university age girl, and the other is a boy who's doing his GCSE or the equivalent of year 11 exams in London as well. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I've been a product manager for the last 14 years or so. I've also had a past career in management consulting as well as in software engineering. So I think a lot of people will relate with this general background or combination of backgrounds because a lot of people will have gone through a similar journey or want to go through a similar journey. So hopefully I can share some stories about what my journey has been, and hopefully people will find it helpful.
Fantastic. Great, Manish. I think I'd just like to double click on that point. I saw, like, from your educational background, computers, engineering, and then MS, and then MBA from LBS, then into management consulting. At what point did you actually think that, product is your thing? Like, did you, like, let's say, reverse 20 years back, did you think that this is a good career option for you? Did you think about that?
I'll be very honest, Atul. When I was doing my master's, for example, or when I was a software engineer, product management, particularly in the areas that I was working in, was not a real it was not a well-defined career, at least. I'm not saying there weren't product managers around. There were definitely product managers, but I came across more people that were technical product managers. Software engineers who had done an MBA and come back into the same company and then become technical product managers. I didn't fully understand what that role was at the time. So to be honest, the answer to your question is no. I did not have product management as a career option in my mind at any point in time until actually pretty close to becoming a product manager, which is quite interesting. I'll come back to that story in due course. But the choices around engineering, I think, like most people who are listening to this podcast, I think that was a bit of a default. Like I'm hoping I'm not misstating here, but a lot of people go into engineering because it seems like the default option when you're going through, you're studying science, you're studying maths. Okay, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to be an engineer. Uh, I I think that was a good choice for me. It kind of worked out quite nicely. Doing an MS was a bit more of a deliberate choice. A master's after engineering and choosing to sort of do a graduation or post graduation or
Did you
master's
not look
degree.
for a job after your engineering?
I did. I did actually work for 6 months in India. Um, that was an interesting time actually. This was quite a long time ago, right? Where again tech was not super well established. The nature of tech tended to be Wipro, Infosys,
Of course.
TCS at the time. Very few people were going into product tech company. There was not many sort of product tech jobs. I actually went to a company that was offering networking and e-commerce type services at the time, helping you with sort of what were called high-speed internet connections, and a bit like BSNL, but for the private sector. And that was interesting because I learned a few things there, but I wasn't actually sure what my job was, to be honest. I was a trainee engineer. And in any case, my plan was I am going to go study abroad, so let me just focus on that. It kind of worked out for about 6 months or so, and then I decided that I'd secured my admission and everything, and I left. This was back in January 2000 now, so nearly 25 years ago. Nearly 25 years ago. That's interesting. So that was intentional. The intention may not have been to become the most amazing, you know, senior engineering expert in the universe. It was really to open up career opportunities, to be very honest. Again, which I think is quite typical for a lot of people. But I did enjoy my studies. I in fact enjoyed my studies more in the US than I did in India, to be honest. It suited me well. The culture of teaching, the culture of exams, how exactly you were taught and how exactly you were evaluated just suited me a lot more. So my grades were much better in the US. I enjoyed my studies a lot more in the US. Of course, the focus was, hey, you got to finish your grad school and then find a job.
Of course.
And I started looking for a job pretty much at the worst time possible because the Silicon Valley bubble had just started to break and burst. This is second half of 2001. So it's a very difficult time to look for a job as a graduate master student. Again, I think I was very lucky, had the right opportunity at the right time, took it, jumped into it, and then of course things started to look much better after that. The next sort of very deliberate choice was to do an MBA, which was what brought me to London as well.
Right.
There were two choices there. One is I want to do an MBA. Why, I'll come to in a second. But then the choice of considering London and coming to London to do it was probably the one that I would say is the more complicated and nuanced sort of decision I made.
Which
But anyways,
is
that's the journey. Yeah.
Yeah, which is actually quite interesting because most people that I see who've actually done a master's usually go for the Ivy Leagues and then they get their MBAs there and then they stay there. So I'm actually quite keen to hear that story in terms of what made you move across this pond.
Sure. So decision number one, MBA karna hai. Chalo. That was decided. Why? I think the motivation for that was primarily, I'd say it's a very simplistic motivation. I always thought that you have to study one or two levels above what your parents or your parents' peer group have studied. You know, that was sort of my very simplistic logic in my head. So of course, when I did my masters, everyone was doing a masters. Now, of course, most people have also done an MBA, but at that time, it was sort of less common. People did their undergrad masters and then they settled into a career. So I had two issues at the time. Number one, I started feeling like the system around in the US, around how your visas and immigration and this and that was quite stifling. As you know, right? You get quite constrained very quickly. You have to focus on a few things until you get your green card and so on and so forth. And there was a sense of unease around the stifling that was happening there. Right? Like I can't explore career options. I can't change companies. I just
You
have
can
to
never
sit
feel
in this
settled in
place.
that mindset, I believe.
What is sorry?
You can never feel settled in that mindset. You're always like, what if something happens? My visa is not 100% sure. So yeah.
Oh yeah, that of course is a whole other kettle of fish in terms of the uncertainty and discomfort that creates, right? But other than that, also just saying, okay, even if I just sit here and do what I'm doing, I have to do this for many years before I can snap out of it. And I didn't feel that that was the right thing at all, for me at least, right? For a lot of people, it's the right thing to do. For me, it was. So that was one, right? This sense of being constrained. The second was this whole simplistic idea of I want to do an extra degree, but also recognizing through the work I was doing at the time that I was actually good at doing some non-software engineering things, which of course I wouldn't be able to do if I remained a software engineer. So this was a way of again opening up some doors and exploring. Consulting in particular became an interesting area for me because that was the kind of work I really enjoyed doing. As a software engineer, I got an opportunity to do a few things which opened my mind to being a little bit more consultative, thinking a bit more around solutions, working with clients directly.
How
And I
did you
thought
go from actual software to consulting, that transition, Manish?
that was very deliberate. So I, I'll answer your question about why London. I think there were two simple reasons for that. Say somewhere intrinsically, subconsciously, there was this desire to be closer to India,
Of course.
which of course if you're in the west coast of the US it's very difficult. Also it was also about the desire to be in a much more globally connected city. I was just talking to someone earlier today, and sometimes you can end up living in a bubble in certain parts of the world, and I think the valley is definitely a bit like that. You're in this tech bubble. It's great. I mean, it's an absolutely amazing place to live in and to work and experience. I would wish it upon everybody to try that once in their lifetime. But I got the sense that maybe being in a global city, being more connected to India, being more connected to other parts of the world would suit me well. And so when the option came up, I considered it very seriously. I had options in the US and then I had options in the UK, and I thought, okay, London Business School, it will check a lot of boxes around that proximity to India, global connection. It was also a 2-year MBA in a small class size, which appealed to me a lot. So that's why I chose it. But beyond that, coming to London Business School, doing an MBA was very much designed towards a consulting career.
Got it.
That was a plan I had in mind. Of course, like any plan, the moment the rubber hits the road, your plan falls apart. So I found it actually really challenging to convince people to give me a management consulting internship or management consulting job. Because again, very typical Indian guy, software engineer, has come to the MBA. You should go do tech, or you should go do something non-finance, non-consulting. Whereas people who came from consumer packaged goods or banks or previous consulting firms, for them getting a consulting internship, consulting job was easy, walk in the park. For someone in my background, it was much harder. So I found it really difficult, but I was quite focused that that's what I want to do because that was my plan. That's what I had really desired because of that exploration of, I like working with clients, I like working on sort of exploring solutions, etc. So I should go into this direction. And so that, despite the difficulties, I managed to succeed after 2 years to become a management consultant. Yeah. I work for LEK, by the way. It's a smaller company, but it was a pretty good training ground as well as a very good experience for me overall. Difficult, but good.
Well, definitely, LEK is a great firm, and I think you also graduated around the financial crisis, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yeah, I tend to choose these times both after grad school and business school. No, luckily the during the MBA my timing was much better in that we had secured our jobs in 2007. We had started working around August September 2008, and this is mid September 2008 is when Lehman collapsed. So I sort of think yes, our timing could have been much better, but it could have also been a lot worse because the class after us 2009 they really had a hard time because the effects of the collapse had already started to take a grip. People had taken stock of everything. Of course, and sadly, a lot of people in my class as well had difficulties. They lost jobs if they were in banking or even in consulting. But thankfully, I was in a job, I was working in projects during that period, and thankfully, I was able to sail through that without much difficulty. It was a difficult time for companies in general, but yeah, I would say luck was slightly more on my side on that occasion.
Fantastic. Manish, I think I see two themes emerging here. So correct me if I'm wrong. People who actually spend some time in the tech in the Bay Area, I see two personas emerge. One is people who actually go and do something of their own, either in the US, or a lot of them actually come back to India, build companies. And then the others like yourself who actually go into MBAs and consulting and venture out of the US as well. Did that dawn on you at any point? Consider moving back or starting something of your own?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that everyone's going to have that feeling at some point or the other. Very few people will act on it. I'm one of them who didn't act on it, but probably for the right reason, right? I don't think any idea that I ever had was so compelling or the attraction so strong that I just drop everything and go. The other aspect of it is, of course, people will start families, then they will have commitments that make it a little bit harder. So there is a window of time, I think, in which if you feel that strong compelling idea, that draw, that pull, then you should go do it. But it is a high risk choice, and I think taking that risk becomes harder over time, especially once you have children, they start going to school, etc. There was definitely one moment or one opportunity that came up which I would say became pretty serious even. But I strongly believe that there is a time and place for everything, there's a flow of everything, and I prefer to just follow the flow and see where it leads me rather than really push too hard at any given point in time. So yeah, I think that nagging sense of, oh, we must try something, we must have, I would love it actually. I would love having some sort of, now that visa and passport and this and
Yeah.
that situation is settled down, you feel a sense of freedom as well around the ability to take risks and all of that. But again, it has never materialized in a very strong way for me to say, yeah, I'm going to drop everything and I'm going to go do this. There have always been more lucrative, stable, and low risk, I suppose, opportunities that have been in front of me at all points in time. So I've chosen to consider. I have interviewed for roles in Berlin. Don't get me wrong. I once did start an interview for a role in Southeast Asia. I once interviewed for a role that potentially could have taken me to India, but these things didn't materialize. They were not meant to materialize. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, we always find a reason to justify how things
Yeah,
work out. So
yeah,
that's great.
absolutely.
Just want to like extend that point on the MBA, Manish. I think, do you feel now the value of an MBA is somewhat diluted? And I think this is something that is now coming up in a lot of questions I get from people who aspire to do an MBA. Should they actually do an MBA? Does an MBA make sense if they've had good careers? Like 5 to 10 years of experience in tech or manage in a managerial position, does an MBA add enough value? Do you think there's a MBA has actually lost its shine, especially the global companies, schools with the hefty bill that comes along with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a tough question as well. I think when I when I went to school, this is now 18 years back, the value of it, the value and cost trade-off was definitely more favorable,
Of course.
definitely more favorable.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, right? Salaries were lower as well at the time. So the fees were lower, but salaries were also lower. Now salaries have become higher. So maybe the cost benefit trade-off is a bit different. I would say it really depends on your reasons for wanting to go. For a lot of people, if the idea of an MBA was simply, I want to get this stamp that is recognized from a recognized school, and that stamp will just propel me forward in my existing career, then potentially that value may not be there anymore. But if you are genuinely looking to learn a set of skills, I'll say two things actually. One is a set of skills. A lot of people who have done engineering, and the world is more savvy now, children are brighter, like everyone's a bit brighter, everyone's more educated because of the internet. Everyone has a university on their device, so everyone knows more about finance, everyone knows more about investing, everyone knows more about everything. But to me, I genuinely learnt a lot of skills during the MBA. Tremendous skills. And I took my study seriously as well. Yes, there was a good balance of fun and in networking and mingling with people and this and that. But for me, the study part of it was quite important, and I benefited from the skills. I learned a lot. As a software engineer, I didn't really pay attention to anything else other than what I knew and what I did. So suddenly, my whole world got open to skills and topics and things I just didn't know, and I felt like my mind was exploding. That was great. The second aspect of it, I think, is you give yourself a real opportunity to think. When else in your career do you get an opportunity to take a year and a half, give it to yourself and invest it in yourself purely? And so this is not just about, am I getting a stamp or am I getting the skills even? The next question is, will I get something valuable out of the opportunity to just think, take a step back, invest in myself, open up my mind to new opportunities, new experiences? Will I go try an internship in a completely different sector and see if that's something I really love? That opportunity, and you don't have to go to business school to do that, but business school definitely opens up those doors, like tons of them. Career opportunities, internship opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities, beyond just the network and all of that, which I think, of course, is valuable. That's the value that I don't think will ever go away from doing that. So I think I'll come back to my original point, right? It really depends on why you consider doing an MBA. Then you have to say, is it going to give me what I want, right? No longer, I think, just for the stamp. You make a very interesting point in your question, right? Are big companies like Meta, Google, whoever else, do they make it a prerequisite for you to have an MBA? I don't think so. I have not seen anywhere. I can't speak for investment banking. I can't speak for management consulting. They probably still value the MBA. But tech companies making MBA a prerequisite, I don't think I've seen that. So really, it's about what doors will it open for you? What will you do when you walk through those doors? How valuable are they for you? That's probably the way I would think about the value of an MBA now.
Fantastic. I think one thing that I personally gained out of the MBA was learning to think how all the different people from different parts of the world think. In my small, very close group, we had someone from Brazil, someone from South Korea, and their thinking was so different from the way we are wired to
Absolutely.
think. I think that sort of learning you can't get anywhere, even in a work culture where you work with people from different nationalities.
True.
MBA is where you spend a lot of time, hours and hours in a closed room together. So that's one thing that really stuck out for me.
That's a very good point, actually. The multinational
Was
exposure, the tolerance as well, right? For different value sets, different mental models. That I think is really that's very special. No,
yeah.
that's a good point.
You slightly mentioned to the next point around tech companies asking for MBA. Job as a product manager, like personally me as well, I see myself coming from the same MBA consulting kind of into PM, and you as well did the same. But there's another route, which is the software engineering track. So is there an alternative parallel universe where Manish would have continued as a software engineer and eventually ended up where you are, maybe quicker or later? Like any thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
No, it's a great question. I've thought about it a lot. Again, as I said, when I was a software engineer, product management was a very fledgling career profession, very fledgling. There are many people probably doing the job without the title, and yeah, it's an entirely possible thing that I could have ended up down the same place. However, I do think my career probably would have been a very tech heavy, very, very tech heavy career. Now I can look back and say I have been a product manager in five or six different types of industries, in travel, in fintech, in music, in ads now, also in childcare marketplaces. So I feel like that level of diversity I would have probably been either averse to myself or just not exposed to, because I would have been stuck in a particular universe. So, but I think it's possible. It's possible that that would have been a path I could have pursued. A lot of software engineering to product management is also a path for people who already have that mindset, right? The product manager's mindset, who are also really, really close to the product, are familiar with the in and outs, and are able to sort of take that, apply, like marry the two things and make the transition. I would say the commercial bent of thinking probably came because of the MBA, because of the management consulting career. That kind of gets drilled into you, as you've probably experienced yourself, right? When you're a management consultant, how you think commercially about things.
Yeah.
So I feel like at the end of the day, everyone's on their own journey. And if you have that product management DNA inside you, you will get there eventually if you want to. Doesn't matter what path you're on. Some paths are more tried and tested, easier, I suppose, and so the doors are a little bit easier to open. Some paths the door will be a bit harder to open, but if you push hard enough,
Yeah.
you can kind of open any door.
Extending that discussion further, how jobs are evolving now with AI and agents doing a lot of stuff. Do you see the product management work changing a lot in the future in terms of what we do right now? Maybe 60-70% of that, all of that could be automated, prioritization and stuff, and all the data being fed into agents. Where do you see the actual value of a PM coming in an organization like Meta at the moment?
I can't speak for Meta specifically, but I can talk about what I think is the repeatable, automatable task that will get automated, and the bits that I think and I hope will continue to be done by humans. PMing is also a big spectrum, right? On one end of the spectrum, neither of them is high or low, good or bad. I'm just saying it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
At all points in time in your career as a PM, you will have to do a little bit of each of these things. But on the one hand, you have the classic program, task, scrum, backlog type of work, which I can imagine more and more tools becoming better at over time. So that becomes slightly, I would say, low value activity, low value work, which I suppose that over time you can expect tools will just get better at doing them. I'm not saying humans won't do them. Humans will always continue to do things, but tools will just become very good. So there will be the fewer people will be needed to do those things. The end of the problem, which I think is complicated, is when you have, see, product managers often work on the basis of partial information, intuition, judgment, and kind of solutioning. That area, I think, will always be something that humans, at least human PMs, will have to do for at least quite some time from now. What I think is the bigger and more interesting challenge is not so much AI taking over the PM job. It's about how PMs, of course, it's cliched, but how PMs can use AI to make their jobs better. Which parts of the job will they actually just ask an AI assistant or an AI tool to do? Which parts of the job, the high value, more complex thinking jobs, they will have more time for that way, right? So that they're more efficient. So I think AI will help PMs become more efficient. The bigger question for me is how long, with everything becoming so much more driven by tech and software, at what point does the PM function remain a unique function versus, I know, for example, at least at the senior levels, the chief product officer role and the chief technology officer roles are getting more and more merged into one.
Exactly.
So I see a lot more in the last maybe 5 years, chief product and technology officer
Yeah,
as a
CPTO
combined
roles
role.
have emerged, yeah.
Now you could argue that people can come from both directions and become the chief product and technology officer. What it requires is a good understanding of how products are built, how tech organizations should be organized and run, and therefore what it's indicative of is product and tech as an organization becoming closer and closer. So you no longer have a PM function separate. You don't have a PM team separate from a tech team sitting as two separate branches of an organization. They're more and more merged into one, which completely makes sense. You own a product, each function, product, technology, design, analytics, whatever, they all sit together and they work on the product together. So my sense is there's another interesting merger happening over there, right? How do product and tech team come together, and therefore how do these two roles come together closer and closer? So I know, for example, a lot of really good software engineers who are extremely good product archetypes, right? So if there are software engineers, maybe some of the listeners of this podcast that are thinking, okay, I might actually be a good product manager because I think like a product manager. I think now more than ever before, there is an appetite and opening for everyone to perform like a product manager, perform the product manager archetype, the function of a product manager. So I feel like there's going to be some interesting changes over there in the next sort of decade or so. We'll see how that lands. But right now, I would say AI, we have a lot of big problems to solve with AI. I don't know if anyone's going to be desperately trying to solve the problem of how do I reduce the number of PMs in my org using AI problem.
Yeah.
It's going to be more, how do PMs work with AI to solve problems faster, to come up with more solutions, to come up with more solutions more efficiently, and maybe tools that will help us reduce the amount of overhead that you have to deal with. So PM is a very human function. It's about understanding people, it's about understanding customers, understanding problems. And so the bulk of the high value work that happens within PM, I think, will remain a human function Or maybe this is my answer because I'm being self-preserving in some way. Who knows?
No, no, you're absolutely right. I don't think there's the AI part has still has that emotional intelligence to be able to feed into that thinking process and the prioritization and work with all the stakeholders. So that part will still be there. But yeah, I mean, it will all be about utilization and how many skills you can actually and what are the upskilling opportunities for PMs in terms of how deep they can go into. I believe that's one thing that I have personally experienced is now I need to have more deeper conversations when it comes to tech, and that's where AI really helps upskill myself on something, sit down and learn something in an hour, and then have a more deeper, enriching conversation with the tech team. So I think that's where the world, the product and tech worlds, as you said, will come very close and will probably become a same function moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
Indeed.
Okay, fantastic. Manish, last question. I
No
think
problem.
we've covered your career and your journey. If you have to go back, let's say to those 2 3 points, let's say 25 years back when you went to MS and when you came here and then you transitioned to product, what advice would you give, if any, or any decision that you would change in your past?
No, I don't think I would change any decision. I'm happy with the decisions I made. Some of them were risky, bold moves, which had, no precedent, at least in my life or in my family. And there was definitely no. I think if I tried to be too rational, I would have maybe chickened out and not made the decision. So I'm happy that I was bold and said, hey, this seems right, this feels right. I'm going to do it. It's risky, but we'll figure it out. If I was too calculating about all the risks and all the downsides and what could happen and what could not happen, I would have probably just not done it, because you take the risks and you think, oh, this is too much to handle. So I would say that I'm happy about. Sometimes you have to be a bit bold and be willing to jump in, right, with both feet in, and just see what happens. I would still repeat that again if I had to, because the adventure is fun, you know. The second thing I would say is, we you can't be too rigid. Ambition and desire and this kind of focus and motivation, all these beautiful things you read about in books and podcasts and all that is great, but not everything is going to go according to plan. You have to be prepared for that. You just have to be prepared for things not to work out in that moment. There's a lot of people think, oh, I wanted this now and I'm not getting it, so my plan has failed. Maybe it hasn't failed. Maybe it's just asking you to take a different
Exactly.
path.
Yeah.
So I would say, and I'm lucky. I came here with consulting in mind. I worked towards it. I got it, and then within a few years, within maybe a few months even, I figured, oh, this might not be a lifelong career for me. It's great for now, but I don't think this is something I will enjoy doing all my life. And that was a very stark change in circumstances. From all my essays, if you read my MBA essays, they were about, I want to be a consultant, here's why, here's what I like about it, blah, 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 to suddenly thinking, okay, I've now got this, this might not be a forever career. You have to be willing to accept that those changes will happen. And that's not a indication of a failure or incorrectness of your plan. It just is a indication that there is a change that needs to happen at some point, right? So I think you have to be open to that as well. No question about that. But my biggest thing, I think, is be willing to try things, right? I've done that. I've really benefited from it. In fact, a lot of PMs ask me, Manish, advice. I'm like, do different things. You're going to be a better product manager because you did different things, rather than, you know, is Meta or Google or Microsoft or Amazon, is that like the holy grail? Yes, of course. These are all excellent companies to go work for as a PM. Are they like the ultimate goal that everyone should traverse towards and end up here? No, not necessarily. For some people, it will be the place where they stay forever. For some people, it's not. And it may come early, it may come late in your career. Like in my case, a career in a big tech firm has come late. And that's okay as well. So I think having the fluidity, flexibility, giving yourself that latitude and giving yourself that grace, I think is important. My sense is far too many people think about all this stuff very linearly. Maybe that's the point I'm trying to make, right? I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that, and it's all going to lead beautifully to this like final amazing thing that I want. And it may not work out like that. Be willing to do zigzag, up, down. Ultimately, you'll get where you need to get. The only thing I would say is, of course, it's important to learn and work sincerely wherever you are. Always be thinking about your next step.
course.
That's a piece of advice I got, which I really value a lot, right? I always think about what's my next step
Yeah.
career wise. So almost like two steps ahead, a bit like a chess game. I make it sound like I'm doing something really fancy. It's not. I'm just thinking, okay, if I do this, what other things can I do after that? What are the like two steps I can take after this? Like that's the basic premise of that piece of advice that I got. But no, I wouldn't change too much. I think it probably is in my philosophy of go with the flow, try things, make the most of them, and then everything you're doing kind of feels okay, right? Nothing feels like, oh my god, I'm in the wrong place, I'm stuck, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. You take it for what it is at face value, you enjoy it, you take the most value out of it, you give the most value as you can, and then other doors open up.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the best advice I've heard. I think we are over time, Manish. So we'll probably end it here. Thank you so much for being here with us and wish you a very happy holidays. Hope you get some time off and get to recharge before the new year. And we'll put the content out. And yeah, thanks again
It
for.
is my pleasure. No, thank you for hosting me. I really appreciated the conversation as well. It's always nice to get a chance to reflect on your own journey and kind of choices you've made and think about post rationalize almost. And this is an opportunity to evaluate and post rationalize along the way, which is helpful. But again, as I said, hopefully it's useful. And if folks feel like they want to get in touch and ask something, or feel free to fire my way, no problem at all. And I wish you and your colleagues a happy holidays as well.
Thank you, Manish. Thank you.
All
Appreciate
right,
it.
Atul. Take care.